All right, students, we're going to talk a little bit about how we write dialogue, how we punctuate it, and what makes dialogue better, more interesting, and what to not write as dialogue. The first thing that we're going to talk about is the main rules. Okay, so every time there is a change of speaker, we get a new paragraph and it's indented. Okay, so that's why when you open up a book and you look at dialogue, sometimes an entire page gets filled up pretty quick with just people speaking, because it starts a new line every time there's a change of speaker. So if there's two people, they're just going back and forth. It's a whole bunch of indented lines, and that fills up the page much quicker. Rule number 2, as I said, is each of those new paragraphs is indented. Okay. Rule number 3 is punctuation for what's said goes inside the quotation marks. Anytime the punctuation is part of that person speaking, they go inside the quotes, so the reader knows how the dialogue is actually said. So punctuation tells us how to read it, and if that person is speaking it, that punctuation goes inside the quotation marks, and it tells us how that person is actually saying that. And the main rule number 4 is skip the small talk and focus only on important information. We'll get to this a little bit more later on, but basically we're only going to say the important stuff. We're only going to show the dialogue that really matters. We're not going to do all the little small talk, and that's key. All right, here are some formatting rules. If we have a single line without a dialogue tag, so we have the quotation marks that open it, capital letter, you really shouldn't have done that, period, closing quotation marks. The period's inside the quotation marks. It's part of what they said. Now, a dialogue tag is when we put in who is actually saying it. Okay? And so here we have one with he whispered. That would be the dialogue tag. So opening quotation marks, you really shouldn't have done that. Now that period gets changed to a comma, closing quotes. We put the dialogue tag lowercase he whispered. Now if it was a name, of course, like John would be capitalized, but if it's just a pronoun, he whispered, then that would be absolutely fine. Okay? All right, next. Questions, we treat them just like commas. Are you sure we have to leave that early? She wondered out loud. Notice this is still lowercase because the question mark inside the quote acts like a comma. Okay, and that would be the same for an exclamation point. Now what if the dialogue tag goes first? He finally said, then we put a comma. Notice that comma is outside the quotation marks because that's not part of the person actually speaking. Fine, let's just go for it, period, closing quotes. Okay, another rule, and you're going to see some of these on the exam. You're going to have to see exactly how we would do this, okay? Sometimes our quote or the dialogue gets interrupted by action, okay? Body language description, for example. So we have opening quote, I don't see what the big deal is, period, closing quotes. She tossed a braid over her shoulder. It's not like she cared anyway is a brand new piece of dialogue, okay? Still the same speaker, but notice if we change it to where she's tossing a braid over her shoulder, we want that to be while she's speaking. So I don't see, she tossed a braid over her shoulder, what the big deal is, right? And so those situations, by the way, this is called an M dash. It's kind of when it interrupts, the action interrupts what they're speaking. So you can imagine this lady speaking, and she says, I don't see what? She tosses a braid over her shoulder. The big deal is. So that would be part of the interruption of actually what she's speaking. A single like, so sometimes when people are talking, other people cut them off, and so you would use a dash to do that as well. Are you crazy? Don't call me crazy, right? The other person cuts that. So, all right. Sometimes we have a dialogue tag in the middle of a line, and this is a little bit different than interrupting, but it's just kind of letting the reader know who's actually saying it right in the middle of what they're saying. You really shouldn't have done that, comma, lowercase, she murmured, period. That will get you in a lot of trouble. And this one's capitalized because it's a new sentence. We had a period here, and that's why we would do that. All right, some final key tips. Say it out loud. So if you want to make sure that it's going to sound right, say it out loud, read it out loud, and make sure that it's fitting with the kind of genre, the kind of style of writing that you're reading, that you're writing about. We've already talked about this, but get rid of the small talk. We don't really care about what you had for dinner last night unless that dinner was poison and is now seeping into the bloodstream and about to impact them and kill them, right? Otherwise, we don't really need to know about the small talk. Okay, and that really, young writers tend to do that. They tend to want to say everything that happens. So it's okay to skip that small talk. Keep it brief and impactful. You know, dialogues in books and in short stories is not meant to be read in a way that we actually speak. And we understand that as readers. It's not full conversations. And if it did, our books would be really long and a whole lot more boring. So we say a lot of pointless, useless things, and so make sure we leave those out of the storytelling. And number 4, give each character a unique way of speaking. Now, this is important, not only that they speak differently, but they also speak differently when they're around different people, right? They don't speak the same way. We all have a specific flow to our sentences. As you listen to me teach you, as I speak to you, I have a certain way of speaking. And as I'm teaching you, I'm speaking much differently than if I was around my friends, right? And so that matters. And that's key what I was just talking about. Think about who they're speaking to, and we certainly change the way we speak by the audience that is listening to us. All right, those are some key terms about dialogue that you should be able to both pass off on a test and then use as you write your own story.